Um, okay, Dale. If you could, my name is Jake Fortenberry, and we're in Columbus, Ohio, at the Hyatt Regency. Today's date is the August the 28th, 1997. Tell me your name, sir.
Dale Kline.
Okay, Dale. If you will, just sort of, where'd you grow up? Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Akron, grew up there. My dad worked for Goodyear Tire, and I grew up on Goodyear Heights. Went to the schools right there in the Goodyear neighborhood. Graduated from Akron U. Started at Goodyear in 1940 and worked there for 46 years. And as I ate lunch in the Goodyear cafeteria, I could look out and see the grade school and high school. So Akron is where I grew up.
Your dad, you said you worked for Goodyear during that time. So how did the Great Depression affect your family?
Fortunately, the managers of the tire companies were the owners of tire companies, particularly Seiberling, who started Goodyear, was a very paternalistic type of manager. He wanted to help his people, his workers, and the area that I grew up in, Goodyear Heights, was built at his request. He wanted some nice homes for the workers, and he tried to get the company to do it, but the company wouldn't do it. So with his own money, he started this real estate project of Goodyear Heights, built some nice homes, sold them to the workers at a reasonable price, and eventually Goodyear took it over. Let's see. I think I drifted from your question, though.
Oh, that's okay.
But you asked about the Depression. These factory leaders were concerned during the Depression that everybody had a job. So instead of an 8-hour shift, they cut back to a 6-hour shift. So they had 4 shifts of people working 6 hours. And at the worst part of the Depression, people were working maybe 6 hours for 3 days a week, maybe even sometimes 1 or 2 days a week. But they tried to keep, rather than fire anybody, they tried to give everybody a little bit of work so that they could survive. And my dad, through the Depression, worked at least 3 days a week, so we had something to live on.
What did your mom do? Was she?
My mother she was a homemaker, not just a homemaker. She was a homemaker, and in those days, that was the normal thing. But as I say, Goodyear was very kind to their workers, and if somebody died for any reason, if the father died, the breadwinner died, they would find a job for the wife, for the widow, so that they could have bread coming in, keeping the family going.
Were you an only child, or did you have brothers and sisters?
I had an older sister, 2 years older. That's all.
So when did you get drafted, or did you join the military?
I enlisted after I graduated from high school. I applied for this apprentice school job at Goodyear, where I would learn to be an apprentice machinist. And I did that for 3 years. And while I was doing that, I also took classes at Akron U and was taking ROTC. And I enlisted, but because I wasn't taking a full schedule, I was called up then in March 21st of 1943, and came to Columbus here and then down to near Galveston, Camp Wallace anti-aircraft training, then over to ASTP, and then to the 12th Armored.
When did you join up with 12th Armored?
It was March of '44 then.
March 44. So did you do any of the Tennessee maneuvers or any time at Camp Barkley?
No. We did some maneuvers at Camp Barkley, but I was never with it in Tennessee. It was in Abilene by the time I joined.
What do you remember about Abilene?
Well, the town, I guess you would say, would be a typical military town. They had a lot of stores selling military equipment, military uniform, things like that. They had a good bus service running from the camp so that you could, on the weekends, you could go into town. And let's see, I don't remember about visiting restaurants there. I think they had a USO where we could get something to eat. I remember after coming off of maneuvers, it was you get so dry because the weather is so hot and you get so thirsty. I went into town on Saturday night after coming, and I drank 3 chocolate milkshakes because I was just so thirsty. It took that to get me filled up.
When you enlisted and before you got to the 12th, what do you remember about basic and the training and stuff?
In basic, we took our training at Camp Wallace, and I was very thin and was always trying to gain weight, and I ate as much as I could to try to gain weight and couldn't. And when we were in the barracks in the first week, some of the guys who had been there for a few weeks came over to talk to us new guys, and they said, when you leave here, you'll be 30 pounds heavier. And I thought, hey, that's great. He didn't tell me that it was going to be because I was carrying a pack and a rifle. But we did a lot of hiking. And of course, in the 3 months, we were supposed to build up our stamina, and we did have, it was anti-aircraft, and we took Bofors 40 millimeter guns down to the beach at Galveston and shot at targets. The pilots from, I don't know, one of Lubbock or one of the Air Force bases around there would tow the targets, and we'd shoot at the targets.
When you were in the ASPs, you were out at El Paso?
Yes. After 3 months of basic training, we went to Texas A&M, which was kind of a distribution center, and from there to El Paso on the train. And I remember being surprised at how dry it was and no trees, because I came from Ohio where everything is green. You have grass and trees, and there was no grass or trees. I wondered, how could people live in an area like this?
So when you were at Camp Barkley, and you went into town, did you ever have a girlfriend or a sweetheart back home, or any of the girls locally that you dated?
No, I'd had a girlfriend before I left, but she sent me a Dear John letter, and that was over. And I did go to one of the churches there, and that's a couple of girls at the churches. But I never really had a date. I never got acquainted with any girls in Abilene.
Would you remember about all the change of command, all the generals and the division commanders being changed around? What would you and your friends and troops think about all that?
You know, that part of it, it's really quite vague to me. And who was the general? Really didn't have that much influence on our day-to-day life there. So I really didn't pay much attention to that.
What do you remember about the train ride, the deployment from Barclay, when y'all were getting ready to go overseas?
Funny you should ask that. I remember standing alongside the tracks and the train was standing there where we were going to board, and these trains each car has a name on it. And here was a car called Tenda Pass, T-E-N-D-A, Tenda Pass, P-A-S-S. And so I had to try to make something funny out of it and said, all things tend to pass. And that stuck with me. The train ride from there to Shanks was a good, pleasant ride through beautiful Virginia countryside. I can remember that part of it.
When you got to Camp Shanks, did they give y'all any liberty or passes, or did y'all just stay there?
Yes, they gave us liberty. I remember we went into New York City one night, and there was really nobody around and nothing to do. we went back, but I have an uncle in New Jersey, and I was able to go visit him. And of course, we weren't allowed to say where we were, and I did not tell him. But he could figure out. He knew pretty well that we were staying at Shanks. But he would ask me, "Well, which way did you come?" Well, I wouldn't tell him.
So, what boat did you go on over when you went overseas?
The Empress of Australia was the boat we were on. It was a pretty good sized ship, and we had a smooth sailing, so that I did not get seasick at all on that trip. And interesting, they like 30 years later or so, my wife and I were interested in antiques, and we'd go around to antique sales, and I came across some papers that somebody had saved where they had sailed on the Empress of Australia from New York to London back in 37 or something like that. But it was what the shock was that they put something like 16 of us in a small room that wasn't very large with all of our duffel bags, and we had to carry everything with us, and the shock was after 16 there wasn't hardly room to stand, and they said, "This is where you're going to spend the whole trip." And I went, how can we do this? There wasn't room for all of us to lay down on the floor even. We had, I guess we were allotted a space 2 feet by 6 feet for each person in that room. So I spent most of the time, I would take my sleeping bag and go up on deck and try to find some corner to sleep in.
Did y'all get along pretty well being all cramped like that? Were there very many squabbles or any disputes?
Oh, no, there was no things. Everybody got along well. There were a lot of guys with gambling, getting some gambling games going, and they were having fun doing that. No, there was no squabbles about that.
What do you remember about the Tidworth barracks over in London?
Getting sick. I can remember the route that we driving in there, and in fact, on a trip to England, I was able to return to that area. So, the barracks were stone, made for the British cavalry 100 years earlier or something. I know I got really sick with the GIs for a couple of days, but got over that. And we had one bad incident there with one of the fellows trying to start a truck. Well, I had a can of gasoline pouring it into the carburetor, and it backfired and sprayed gasoline over and burned him. But we did have then an opportunity to go to London on a pass. And also, but one of the first things that happened when we got there, a group of us went up to Liverpool and picked up some, I forget whether we picked up our tank carriers or went up there and put tanks on. I forget. I think we just went up there and picked up tank carriers. And coming back, in order to get the tank carriers under some of the bridges, we had to let the air out of the tires so that they could get underneath the bridges. While we were there, we stayed overnight at a base in a tent where, in an Air Force station where there was an Air Force base.
What do you remember about the boat ride from England over to the mainland?
That was an LST. We had to. I was the driver of our truck for our maintenance division. I was in the 3rd maintenance section of Company C, and I was the driver of the 6x6 towing a trailer, and I had to back it onto the LST and then chain it down and then of course drive it off onto the beach at La Havre. And while we were on the water, it was November 11th, and we had some good food. We thought the Navy boys really ate well because we had meat and pie and things.
You remember anything about La Havre?
Only that the beach was gravel. That's all I remember.
Where was the first place that y'all went after La Havre, your company?
Well, Offay was the first place we stayed. We stayed there for 2 or 3 days, I think. And we got a chance to go into town to the local bars, and we'd order 3 cidres, 2 ciders. We learned a little French. I remember there was a farmer with a team of horses saying "Hello," and which meant "Let's go." And I was learning a little bit of French from that. I remember that part of it. But it rained practically the whole time we were there.
Did the French civilians, were they happy to see y'all, or did they not like y'all, or?
They were very, very, very friendly, I thought. I didn't see any problems with civilians, no.
What do you remember about Horoshan?
Now, we weren't I was not near Herlesheim when it happened. Our company was quite far from there. I have a good friend who was killed there, and as I understand it, was near the cemetery area, and he was hit directly by an 88. He lived in Akron, Ohio, and I knew his family. I know, and he's buried in Akron. But that's all I know about Herlesheim.
You all didn't go up there and fix anything, repair anything after the battle was over? There were just a certain part of the crew who ran the tank retrievers that would do that, and I never was on that duty. I never went up to retrieve a tank. What do you remember about, like, you remember in basic who was your best friend and who was like your best friend when you were over in Europe? Who was your buddy who you hung out with?
Well, there was a fellow that I liked really well by the name of John Bybee, who was really an old man to us. He was like 36 years old or something. And we remained good friends. He lived in Canton, Illinois, and whenever I went that way, I'd stop to see him, but he's since died. But also I had a good friend, Jerry Huntington, and I have a lot of good stories to tell about him. He was from, I think, ASTP at New Mexico, and he lived in Oroville, California, and I have a lot of interesting stories to tell about him. He was always doing something. Do you want to hear the stories about Jerry Huntington?
Yeah, I'd love to, sir.
He had experience. I guess his dad owned a garage for electrical repairs of automobiles, and so he was interested in that. So he brought with him a car radio. He was driving he drove a weapons carrier as his job. He brought with him a car radio in the bottom of his duffel bag. Now, when you're climbing the gangplank, you have two duffel bags, all your belongings, your gas mask, your gun, and everything. It's really quite a bit to haul all that up. But I felt sorry for him because he had this extra 20 pounds or so in the bottom of his duffel bag that he carried. But it turned out that at the end of the war, on May 5th, he had that where he could listen to the radio, the German radio as well as the American radio. On May 5th, we heard Achtung, Achtung, German Army Group G, lay down your arms, surrender. And so we knew the war was over one day before anybody else did on that radio.
That's cool.
Another time, we had tanks that were being repaired that were with the company as we moved along, and one day the master sergeant told Jerry that he should go with that tank over there, pointed to a tank, and so Jerry went over and sat in the assistant driver's seat, and the convoy was pulling out, and he was waiting for the driver to come. The driver didn't come. Finally, the master mechanic came over and said, "Hey, you drive it." So he got out of the assistant driver's seat, got in the driver's seat, and by that time the convoy was practically out of sight. So he got in, got going as fast as he could, and he got into this little town, and it turned, and in the center of town was a left-hand road off to the left, and he didn't know whether to go straight ahead or turn left. Well, in the middle of the intersection, he decided he should turn left, but he was going too fast. He tried to turn the corner, but the right corner of the tank ran into a brick building. And he punched a hole in the brick, and the bricks were falling in the assistant driver's seat. And he backed out, and he looked through the hole, And inside was a family seated at a dining table eating dinner. But he didn't stop. He just backed out and went on, tried to catch the convoy.
What do you remember, or what do you remember people saying or thinking about General Patton?
I think they thought he was a good general. I didn't hear any, I don't recall any, disrespect for him.
What do you remember about the race to the Rhine as being y'all were Patton's spearhead? How did that affect y'all?
Well, we had, we were part of the Patton's Third Army as we went from Metz to Trier. And I remember, of course, I'm a truck driver in the convoy all this time. And so I remember the roads going into, I didn't know at the time, but evidently we went through Luxembourg and over to Trier and crossed the Rhine there, and then went east from there. And I remember, and I was since back to Germany one time and saw that spot where we crossed the Rhine and the road we took then east out of there.
Did the German civilians, were they hostile or just normal people? What do you remember about the German civilians?
No, I didn't see, they did not seem to be hostile, no. There were no incidents that I know of.
Did your company participate in anything with the liberation of the death camps or the POW camps?
Well, yes. I think his name is Hartwig. Was one of the more advanced units. I was not there. We were further back at the time, but they captured at Lonsdale a German prison, a prison camp, a concentration camp, and they had all of these starved people, just emaciated skin and bone, and they tried to kill them all. Their bodies were stacked like cordwood. They tried to kill them all before we came, but Sergeant Hartwig took pictures of all this, and he had about a set of 30 pictures that was passed out to everybody in the company. And we later toured it, the place, after all the bodies had been removed. And I remember a little piece of the uniform was blue and white, and I remember a little piece of blue and white uniforms laying there that I picked up and had as a souvenir, but I probably since lost it. And when I came back, all of my stuff was stored at my mother's house, and she threw those pictures away. She thought they were too horrible. So, but I'm sure that those pictures are available from somebody in the unit.
So you said you heard on the radio and knew a day early that the war was over. Sure, that made y'all happy. How much longer did you have to stay overseas?
Well, almost a year. It was that was May 5th. I didn't leave until around the 1st of March the next year. I was in 1st Armored. We had there's a picture there of the group that I was with in 1st Armored, and a list of the people there.
And Do you remember anything about peacekeeping duty or the occupation?
Well, we would try to get passes. I know, being a truck driver, I'd drive to take a group of people to I think over to eastern France, to the rail station, to a railroad where they would get on the railroad and go to Paris. So I did that quite a bit. I did a lot of driving. We took a trip through over Ammergau. I remember Tegernsee being a beautiful spot. Innsbruck. Went skiing in Innsbruck in July. Just to say I did it. There was just a pile of ice there, and you really couldn't ski anywhere. But and I got a trip to Paris, trip to Nice, trip to Berlin. For some reason, I have a hard time remembering the trip from there to the port to Bremerhaven where we left. That's kind of blank to me. But I remember being on the ship, the Liberty ship. I was so sick for the first 3 days. I didn't eat for 2 days, seasick. And that was a new experience for me because the coming over on the Empress of Australia, it was smooth enough that I didn't have any seasickness. But after about 3 days, I got my appetite back and was eating well, and enjoying the trip.
So where did y'all land when you got back to the States?
Came in right into New York Harbor. We have pictures of the Statue of Liberty coming into New York Harbor.
And how much longer did you stay in the military before you got out then?
Oh, that's the next day we were out. Discharged at Fort Dix and came home. Yeah.
And you just went home from there?
Yeah.
That's all I've got. Can you think of any other questions?
Did you have any colorful things happen to you while you were driving trucks during the war?
No, not really. There was, well, one of the most risky things that happened to me was when we went into Colmar. We were there for there was some kind of mix-up, and the ordnance got ahead of the army, the infantry, I think, going into Colmar. We were there, I think, the day after the Germans left, and they were shelling the town with a railroad gun. And the Lieutenant Gaines told me that I should stay with the truck. The building was right downtown in the business district, and the truck was parked along the street in the business district, and he said I should stay with the truck all night. Well, I had a place to sleep in the back of the truck. But about 10 o'clock, they started shooting that railroad gun, and I heard a big explosion to the left of me. And 15 minutes later, a big explosion to the right of me. And I said, uh-oh, here it comes. And 15 minutes later, it went overhead, a block down the street, blew the top off the building. So I was fortunate. The shell had enough powder in it to go overhead. That was probably the most risky part of the whole war for me.
Dale, we appreciate it. That's all we've really got.
One point I would like to make is that I've written a book called "We Can Prevent Wars." I've been studying what can we do for the last 30 years. Kissinger's Diplomacy has a pretty good explanation of this. a book called Diplomacy. But in the early part of this century, empire building was still considered a good national sport. England was respected because they could look at a map of the world and see pink all over the world. There was Canada, Australia, India, and the other countries, Italy, Mussolini, he wanted to be an empire, so he wanted to conquer Ethiopia. And Japan wanted to be an empire, so they conquered Manchuria. Germany wanted to be an empire, so they conquered all that. But that was the mindset in those days, that to have a national ego, you wanted to conquer territory. And fortunately, that mindset has changed since World War II. Colonialism is no longer considered an ideal. England gave up all their colonies. And along with that, in those days, there was a lot of antithesis between all the races. And you thought nothing of calling, we had slang names for all the different nationalities, like Mick and Spick and all that. And we thought nothing about telling jokes about the Jews or Scotch or whatever. All of that's gone now. Since the civil rights movement, we treat all the other nationalities more equally now. And this idea of pluralism, I think, is a great advancement. So I think the young people today are fortunate that they're living in a time where we've given up on the idea that in order to be a great nation you have to conquer somebody, or that you have to express racial superiority. Today we get our ego, I think, by commercialism and by sports. In the Olympics, we liked, instead of fighting wars, we support the Cleveland Browns, or we have to tie our ego to something. People need to have their ego bolstered in order to make life interesting and worthwhile. Saddam Hussein said it very well in his interview with April Glaspie, and this was documented by Pierre Salinger in a book that he wrote, and I have copied it in the book I wrote. Saddam said that we have our pride. He said, we don't care whether you come at us with 1,000 atomic bombs. We either live with pride or die. He said, I think every man in the world can understand that. Well, there's a lot of insight into that one little statement, that people need pride, and and that's why we need the Cleveland Indians, and we need sports, and that's why I think men are so interested in sports, is because it gives them a source of pride. Now, we could go a little deeper into that, and I explain this in the book, that whether we believe in evolution or not, we all have a portion of the brain that's called the limbic portion, which duplicates that of reptiles. And it also is the source of all the bad emotions that we have, like particularly ethnocentrism, our race is superior. Territorialism, this is our territory and anybody comes in it, we'll kill them. Aggression, those are enhanced by testosterone. The influence of testosterone on the limbic portion of the brain causes these emotions. And that's why men are more aggressive than women. and men will commit murder 9 times for every once for women. 1 in every 37 men in the United States will commit murder sometime in his life. People need to realize that the lower portion of the brain is the source of these bad emotions that cause our superiority, desire for superiority, and denigrating other races. But we have the upper part of the brain, which is logic and reason, which controls the lower part of the brain. And we know that because when boys are disruptive in class, they're given Ritalin. And you would think Ritalin is a tranquilizer. No, it's not. It's a stimulant to stimulate the upper part of the brain so that the upper part of the brain will control the lower part of the brain. And that's one of the things that I like to publicize, that I think all children should be taught that, so that they understand that whenever they have those bad feelings, it's coming from the wrong part of the brain. They got to listen to the upper part of the brain and control those bad feelings, so that whenever you see a kid acting up, bullying somebody, you can say, well, he's running on his reptile brain. That's a large part of the story that I presented in my book, We Can Prevent Wars.
Yeah. That's good stuff.
That's enough.
All right.